Cheeseheads. Get on your feet. It's Curd and Long. Hosted by Sparky, Fifer, and Ryan Horvath.
Welcome in. It is another edition of Curd and Long from the Toy Drive this week. Ryan is out sick, and I don't think he'll be back this week as he has no voice currently as we record this on Wednesday. So as always, I go to my emergency backup, who always is available, and I appreciate so much. He is Kevin Holden, CBS58 sports director, Packers play-by-play announcer for Telemundo, Crunchy Kevin Holden, as I like to call him. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, Sparky, I always appreciate that I'm your first call. I don't really do much. I just hang out and look at Rubik's cubes and baseball cards. I don't have much to do.
Make sure to follow him on Twitter at 321Q Kevin. I just realized that I never put it up on the video on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. I have Nathan Marzion's Twitter account up there from Green and Growing still. So way to go, me. Okay, so we're out here at the Toy Drive at Blaine's Farm and Fleet. My brain is mush from doing this Toy Drive all week. So it's day 3 right now, and you can still have time. We're here till Friday. I'm out here every day, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Come on out, say hi, hang out with us. And you can donate brand new toys like some of you have done. Cash donations accepted this year. Last year we couldn't do it, but this year we are, mainly because Children's Wisconsin was nice enough to give us volunteers for every shift of every day out here that can collect money for us. Checks, you can write checks out as well. You can donate online at 1250 AM thefan.com too. And hopefully we'll see our fire departments like we normally see. Normally we get Oak Creek Fire Department on here. Normally we get Franklin Fire Department, North Shore Fire Department. I'm not sure if they'll be out here this year or not, but I'm hoping to see them this year. That would be kind of cool. Kevin, you've been out here at the Toy Drive over the course of 17 years. This is the 17th year we're doing it. I don't know. Give me your thoughts and memories on the Toy Drive.
So some of my favorite memories, because it to me it marked, well, for one, it's a good cause and a good event and something that's great to be a part of, but it sort of marked a time of year. Usually by the time we got to this point, we were talking some very specific things, the end of the college football season, the heat of Packers season. And it's funny to go back and think, like I was thinking the other day about the first time I was there, when I had first moved to Milwaukee, and the topics of conversation that we were talking about. You know what we were talking about? It was would Jimbo Fisher be a good college head coach, like at a major college football program? And the second year it was, how in the world are the Packers winning with Frank Zombo, and how long could that possibly last?
Yes, no doubt. And for me, my Toy Drive favorite memory of Kevin Holden involves food. Kevin Holden was the one that introduced all of us, I believe, on the big show, but specifically me, to chocolate licorice. I had never heard of it in my life. He's like, oh, I got to get some chocolate licorice while I'm here. I'm like, what are you talking about, chocolate licorice? You'll see. He goes inside, gets a couple bags of chocolate licorice, gives me a bag. Here, you'll love it, Sparky. It was good. It was really, really good. Good old Kevin Holden coming through on the food end out here at Farm and Fleet for the Toy Drive. And we got to talk, obviously, Packers. And think of all the different Packer topics, like you brought up Zombo, all the different Packer topics that were covered out here at this Toy Drive, including Rodgers becoming starter, the end of the Favre era, kind of went through all of that because this is always during Packer season. We're always the first week after Thanksgiving, that Monday through Friday. So we talked a lot. And now here we are on our third starting quarterback in the Toy Drive era with Jordan Love now, and everybody wants to throw out these numbers about him and Aaron Rodgers through, 11 starts and how pretty much similar they are. Yards are the same. Touchdowns and interceptions differ by like one each way. And I said it on Monday with Bart Winkler. I'm interested to hear what you say. They're giving you these numbers with the intent of making Jordan Love look good, right? That's the intent. Oh boy, look, see, everybody was on Jordan Love, but look, his numbers are just as good as 12, and 12 is a Hall of Famer. And, you should be happy about that. I think the numbers are completely unfair and unjust and really don't tell the story for Jordan Love. And he kind of gets screwed in this whole deal. When Aaron Rodgers took over, Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, Donald Driver, those are the guys he was playing with. He had a good offensive line, not Rasheed Walker at left tackle, John Runyon at right guard, first and second year players at wide receiver who still aren't doing the right things. Jordan Love said in the last game, that first touchdown, Jaden Reed, Watson ran the wrong route. That's why he cut in front of him when the ball was thrown for the touchdown. So they're still not running the right routes. It's still a train wreck out there for the most part. The guy you built the offense around is a running back named Aaron Jones, who played a part of a game in week 1, hurt his hamstring, gone for several weeks, comes back for a couple of weeks, and gone again. So that whole offensive philosophy that you were going to do in training camp goes straight out the window, and you have to adjust. To think of what he's had to overcome in his first year as starter and to put up the numbers he's putting up, to me, is far more impressive than anything Rodgers did his first year as a starter.
Yeah, it is. Aaron Rodgers literally was given the seat, and the keys to the fancy offense. Just slide on in. They're expecting Jordan Love to be the engine. Rodgers had everything around him. Jordan Love has to create what's around him, and he has to do it with this super young receiver room. And the fact that from week to week we've been wondering, okay, who really is the number 1 or number 2 receiver? How do they slide in? Who's going to be the options past that? Can Luke Musgrave do something? And these guys are all so young. It's actually, I wasn't 100% on board the thought process until the last couple of games. Not just the fact that they were wins, but the fact that, first of all, you see an improvement, but you also see a difference in confidence. The fact that the Packers went to Detroit Thanksgiving Day in a game that everybody in the world thought they were just going to get blown out of the water, and they turned around and did the exact opposite. They turned around and blew the Lions out of the water right off the top and then held on to win the game. That was one of those things you can build off of. And I'm really curious about it, because I did not want to do this Packers are a playoff contender thing if they aren't actually a playoff contender. But on the other side of the Chiefs, they've got the kind of schedule that sets up for a win streak. They're a playoff contender, Sparky. They are. It's crazy.
That's the one thing. I was reading CBS Sports earlier today, and they have their projections for the playoffs. They project the Packers as the last last wild card, the NFC playoffs. Part of that reason is the remaining schedule, the winning percentage is less than 40%. It's like 390 something or whatever. They have the easiest schedule left of everybody in contention right now. Do the Green Bay Packers. Now, again, you have a young team. That does not mean they're going to win every one of these games. They're probably going to stub their toe. They're going to have issues along the way. It's probably not going to go as smoothly. But to think of where they were, and Bart brought this up on Monday, where you had people on his podcast, on the Bart Winkler Show podcast, calling up and saying, boy, if we lose the rest of these, we have a chance to get May or Caleb Williams, because it's clearly not Jordan Love. He's not the answer. Just ignoring everything else going on around Jordan Love and just putting it all on Jordan Love was stupid to begin with. And then essentially rooting for that to be a horrible draft pick so you can get a quarterback. And now they start winning, and these same people now are mad that they're winning because they don't want to keep Jordan Love regardless. So these people's minds were pre-made before the season even started that they were going to get down with the guy that they drafted to replace Aaron Rodgers, and they were moving on. Just like a lot of people predetermined that they were going to hate Aaron Rodgers forever because they wanted Brett Favre to be the quarterback, and no matter what happened, wasn't going to change their mind. I think when you look at how this sets up right now, going forward, it's to me not about the Packers offense, because all year to me it has been about the Packers offense. Packers defense, I know what that is. Just show me improvement on the offense by the end of the year, regardless of win total. Give me some hope for next year, and I'm good. In fact, at one point I told Ryan Horvat, my normal co-host, I said, if he just throws Love one time over 300 yards, that's all I need to put a hand into the face of all the anti-Jordan Love people. I can point to one game and go, that's what he's going to be. Shut up. I'm done. I don't want to listen to it anymore. Well, he's done far more than that now. I mean, he's on a major role at this point. The deep passing game has been really good here for the last 3 or 4 weeks as well. He's hitting more of those throws, so that's good. My issue is defensively, I don't believe what I saw in the Lions game. I think it was a mirage. I don't believe it's real. I'm not buying into it. And when you talk about the Chiefs game coming up on Sunday night, I was on with Bob Fesco and Josh Klinger in Kansas City earlier this morning doing their morning show. And I told them the same thing. I'm like, I think the Packers can score, 17, 24 points, something like that. But I don't know if they can keep them under 30, that being Kansas City, especially if Jair Alexander, who's been battling a back injury, if he's not 100% or if he doesn't play. And if Devondre Campbell, if he's not 100% or if he doesn't play, those are two big losses to try and overcome against Patrick Mahomes, who is not Jared Goff, by the way. And everybody should remember this going into Sunday Night Football, regardless of where they play the game, Kevin. So for me, my big concern when we talk about playoffs is just what will this defense look like the rest of the year? And will they hold up their end of the bargain to help this offense?
They're going to need, the one thing they're going to need more, maybe more than anything else, is just health. And it's a lot to ask of an NFL team in November and December when everybody is banged up. I think even if they face the Chiefs another week or two down the line, with Eric Stokes healthier, with Darnell Savage healthier, with those guys farther removed from their injuries, that would help. I don't know if it'd help enough to contain the Chiefs enough to beat them handily or anything like that. But if they can avoid having further injuries and they can get that secondary filled back out, and you have, Jair at full strength and Eric Stokes and Darnell Savage and so on, facing, Bryce Young in Carolina, facing, even Minnesota, with Dobbs, it's going to play in their favor if they can stay healthy. But again, it's a roll of the dice. It's almost random what the health luck was like. If the health luck is really, really good, then this team turns into someone that goes on a run late in the season, makes the playoffs, and has a defense to at least compete. Even if they make the playoffs, I'm not expecting some big long run. I think getting there, this would be the one time in the last 30 or 40 years of Packers history where we made the playoffs would be the banner you would wave. Yes. But it's worthy. It's a worthy banner, because even a few weeks ago, early in the year, it was week 3 or 4, and we were in the press box at Lambeau, and someone brought up the phrase "worst team in the NFL." That phrase was brought up. Worst, they could be the worst team in the NFL. Clearly, they're not. They're an upper half team, I would say, in the NFL.
Think about this. If I tell you, okay, project over the next 3 years, who has the best quarterback situation in the division right now? It's Green Bay. It's all day. It's Green Bay, because Jared Goff isn't getting any younger. He's obviously still not the guy, regardless of what Lions fans want to tell you. Chicago might be getting another quarterback in the draft this year, right? And Minnesota has no idea what the hell they're doing at quarterback. They're going to try and bring back Kirk Cousins, it sounds like, which is lunacy. So, you look at it from that perspective, Favre owned the division, Rodgers owned the division, and this is getting set up for another Packer quarterback to own this division for the foreseeable future, Kevin. And that is going to make Bears fans cry, Vikings fans cry, and Lions fans cry if he's as good as what it appears he is.
The folks who are from outside the division, the Jordan Love haters and those that are rooting for the non-success of the Packers, those who support other teams, are missing one key element here, which is the Packers' current situation is like it is because they are in absolute salary cap purgatory. They are paying a ton of money to Aaron Rodgers and a significant amount of money to David Bakhtiari and others. They're hamstrung. It's not that, if they had money, they could go and fill this out. Well, that's not going to last forever. It's going to be off the books pretty rapidly. So when you talk about those years down the line, the first thing I thought of is not only will Jordan Love be on a better path for progression, but the Packers will be on a better path to get him some help, whether it's receiver or even on the other side of the ball, the defense getting stronger and taking some pressure off of him. They're set up well. And once that, once the Rodgers nightmare ends, when you're talking money, that they're having to pay him, it's going to change the game. Now, obviously, Love's contract is going to have to change in this situation, but there will be money to be spread around. They're not in a bad place, man. They're really not.
No, they're in a pretty good spot right now going forward. And the other thing too that you think about, Matt LaFleur got a lot of criticism earlier in the year. See, Aaron Rodgers was the guy. It wasn't Matt LaFleur. He wasn't that great of a schemer. Okay, well, now let's revisit this. If they make the playoffs this year, and let's say they miss the playoffs, but they win 9 games, they go 9-8 in his first year with everything we talked about that's happened already. I'm sorry. You can't question Matt LaFleur going forward as far as what he is as a head coach, what he is as a play caller, as an offensive coordinator. Like, to me, that all goes out the window. You could still question his undying loyalty to Joe Barry. Fair. I'll give you that. But outside of that, as far as on the offensive side and as a leader of men, I don't think you can question it anymore going forward if they win more games than they lose in the first year with Jordan Love as a starter.
Yeah, it is. It's impressive. It will be impressive just because of, the progression of what's gone on through the Rodgers era and so on. Plus, the other half of it is to make a reactionary decision, even after what would be considered a successful season, 9-8. If they do something reactionary, the Packers front office, that would be out of character. It's really not the way they do things, whether it's developing a quarterback or dealing with a head coach or whatever. The Packers have their process, and I don't think it's changed, even with the personnel having changed. It's interesting that this season happened in part because the Packers did one time get away from the way that they handle specifically players and player longevity. Jordy Nelson and Josh Sitton and TJ Lang and all the guys that got cut, and it hurt at the moment because it's like, man, these guys are viable players, and it turned out they weren't as viable. They were on that downward slide, right? Rodgers was an interesting case, and they had to figure something out. They had to make a couple of decisions along this year and all that money that you're paying to Rodgers, but they don't vary from that way, and that way has produced a lot of winning teams through the years. So I think it goes straight to the head coach. If they're 9-8, I think the last thing on earth they want to do is pull the plug and try to start something new. They've been building. It would be a terrible time to tear down.
What about Brian Gutekunst? Now, this is a guy that also was under fire, right, for some of these drafts lately that haven't been necessarily the best. Now, it appears this last draft has hit some guys, right? I mean, you've got a couple of interior defensive linemen that both have been playing really well at this point. You got to be happy about that. The wide receivers to this point, I think Jaden Reed looks like he's a keeper kind of going forward here, and we'll see what that ends up looking like. Musgrave and Kraft, I think they're going to be the tight ends of the future for this team. They did some nice things in this draft, but again, everybody on Goody about how this whole thing played out. I argued and have argued all year they did not give Jordan Love the best chance to win or put him in a position to win. They were willing, and Goody even said it at the beginning of the year, didn't he, where he said, yeah, we may have to take a step back to get back to where we want to be going forward. So he knew that it may not be a great year going in, and he was willing to accept it. And I'm sure LaFleur knew that there was a possibility that it could be a long year and that it may suck too. But now when you look at how this whole thing played out, again, if they win more games than they lose, Gutekunst is going to come up looking on the other side of this like a Swami as well.
Yeah, and you know what's weird about it too is Goody's had to ride the roller coaster a little bit, and that's one of the things about when you've had all this success and then you take that step back and then come up. Remember at the trade deadline, the Packers were sellers. Well, I would say they're sellers. Yep. They sold Rasul Douglas, but that was in that moment what seemed like the right thing, and now you're thinking, man, Rasul Douglas kind of help a little bit right now, but he's had to sort of ride this wave and figure out where exactly are the Packers and where will they be? What can they be this year? What can they be down the road? I think that the thing about the drafts is it's going to be this. It's the best way to say it. It's this almost like impossible standard. Ted Thompson did a terrific job drafting, but also for whatever reason, some of these guys that he picked just blossomed, and they had so many that did it that, to be compared to the draft classes that got you Clay Matthews and Jordy Nelson and all that, it's just impossible. Like who on earth can replicate that? There is no system that will be better than everybody else's to the point that you could replicate it. So Goody, I think, is having good, solid drafts that get overshadowed by the fact that the Packers had these otherworldly drafts for a while. But if he stays on the course here, even if it's not going to be a top 10 pick like we thought for a while, I think it works in a good direction. And one more draft could do this team some real good as those young guys get a year older and you slide in guys behind them. It'll help the depth a lot.
Think about it. He's got multiple 2s, multiple 3s. I think they're going to have multiple 4s as well, plus his first-round pick. I mean, they're in a position to where he can make his first-round pick, and then with his extra picks, he can maneuver right back into the first round. They could end up with literally 2 first-round picks. The one mock draft today, I saw them taking a corner out of Alabama. But if you look at the end of the first round of some of these mock drafts, it's littered with offensive tackles. So you could come out of this with a cornerback to play opposite Alexander, because I don't know if anybody has faith in Eric Stokes coming back and being the same guy again. So you could draft a corner to play opposite Alexander and draft yourself a starting right tackle, probably not left tackle, but maybe right tackle. And then Zach Tom maybe slides into right guard to replace John Runyon, who's definitely gone after this year, I would assume. And then all of a sudden that right side becomes a little bit more solidified, still without a left tackle, obviously, and that is a thing. The other option would be draft a left tackle, that first round pick, and then maybe you come back and get a right tackle. Maybe take 2 linemen in the first round, or come back and get a corner or a safety at the end of round 1. But the options are plentiful when you have all of this extra draft capital.
Yeah, that's the fun of it, that you can build it one of several different ways. And the way that line is set up right now, you have to think the success that Jordan Love is having is a little bit more in spite of, not because of, what goes on a lot of that offensive line. So if you make that line viable, if you just make it, solid, kind of like umpires, right? The less you talk about them, the better they're doing their job.
Right.
If you have that, then that's a giant step forward. And it's a big step forward all the way. The effect goes all the way down the line. It helps Love a ton. It helps his receivers because it helps Jordan Love. And then eventually it comes around and helps running backs, especially if the blocking is good. But also this concept that for the first half of the year that it was either Aaron Jones in the offense or absolutely no offense, that can go away. Like whatever happens in the backfield in the future, you don't have to depend on that one person, to be the guy that does this. I like the idea of getting offensive linemen in that draft early. I mean, obviously they're very much about best available, sometimes to a fault, sometimes even, if the position isn't a position of need in the moment, they'll do it anyway. But I wouldn't mind seeing picks that were cited instead of for 3 years down the road, maybe for a year or two down the road, because I think the downward dip could be smaller if you play it right in this draft.
I totally agree with you, 1,000%. The other thing that just annoys the hell out of me when I hear broadcasters, Packers offensive line has played well this year. Tell me that you haven't watched Packer film. Just what's the easiest? Because again, maybe you look at numbers and the numbers say they're good, but I'm telling you they're not. The one area that has improved in the last 2 or 3 weeks that doesn't get a lot of talk, and I don't know if it's you give the players a slap on the back, good job, you figured it out. Is it the coaching staff? Do they get the good job? Because when it was going wrong, it was their fault, and that is flags. Not an issue anymore. I mean, before it was false start, holding, illegal motion, whatever. Every time you would try to get something going on offense, you would get pulled back and negated, and then you were playing from a deep hole. LaFleur was crying about it for weeks, and now all of a sudden, like, poof, gone. Don't see it anymore for the last 3 or 4 weeks. If that stays the rest of the year, then this offense is going to be fine. And again, I don't know who you give credit to. I would assume the players, because they're the ones not making the penalties anymore. But I think the coaches probably deserve some credit too for coaching them up.
Yeah, that to me, it's a system-wide change, something that you identify this as a problem. You got to fix it. We got to work on it. Let's, focus on these specific things, and then the players execute it, and it happens. I think it's everybody deserves a little credit. And Detroit was the example that I thought that was fantastic, because during that game, how many times was I thinking they're driving down the field and I'm like, oh, this is right here, 3rd down at the 25 or 30 yard line where you're thinking about 3 points at least, and then the penalty comes, and now you're 3rd and 19 down there, and you have to change everything and expect a miracle. That happened far too often in the first half of the season. But as you mentioned, it's way less now. And I thought not only does it help you put points on the board, it helps the flow go better. Like if you're Jordan Love, you're not making progress, and then all of a sudden you're okay, now we have to change gears. You can, continue on that flow of an offensive drive. I think it builds the confidence of your quarterback. No doubt about it that there are some teams where penalties, I think we talk about it too much with some teams, not enough with this team. That change in penalties has been a huge confidence booster.
Okay, so tell me this. Going into this game on Sunday, Kansas City Chiefs, primetime in Green Bay, which is great for Jordan Love. He doesn't have to deal with arrowheads, crowd noise, or whatever the case may be. So that's a huge positive for the Packers. What are you the most intrigued to kind of see as far as a matchup goes, one way or the other, going into this game?
So the thing about the last game, the Lions game, is it's a Thanksgiving Day game, and there is a bit of a national stage to it, but it's at 11:30 in the morning, and it's really difficult. What was it? The most watched game in the 11:30 time slot ever on Thanksgiving, I think they said. Which is great. I mean, you division rivals, and there was a lot to watch there. But there's something about it. It's a holiday and it's 11:30 in the morning. That's more of an oddity, I think, in the schedule than anything else. This is prime time and true, honest to goodness prime time football. The kind of prime time game that has a week of hype leading up to it, even if it's a pop star that's the reason. Don't start me, but that's one of the reasons why this game has so much attention. Everybody is paying attention. The entire nation's going to be watching. It's Lambeau Field in December. There was a time for a lot of years when we talked about mystique and the fact that the Packers had this ungodly record at home when the temperature got cold. November and December, they were almost unbeatable, even against the good teams at home. This is that chance. What intrigues me is Jordan Love can go from the guy who's replacing Aaron Rodgers to the guy who steps into the shoes now, and he gets it done in a primetime situation against a top-notch team. I don't know if I'm ready to predict a victory for the Packers, but how Jordan Love handles himself in this game, what that is like in reaction to the situation is going to be a telling sign. And if he does well with it in this game, then that momentum is there for the last, 6 weeks, 5 weeks of the season.
I think this is a significant test for Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. Because remember, his only time starting prior to this year was against this Spagnuolo-led Chiefs defense that had them all kinds of confused and creating all kinds of problems for everybody. And Love looked horrible. And they were still in that game in the fourth quarter, but he looked horrible. And then after the game, LaFleur's like, that's my fault. Like, I didn't give him safety valves to throw to on these zero blitzes. Like, I didn't do anything to really help him as much as I should have. Put it on me. Okay. Now, I think when this schedule came out, Jordan Love circled this game back when the schedule came out and said, that's the game I want to be ready to ball out in. This is the game that we have to be going by because I am not going to look bad against them again. And LaFleur needs to have this offense right and ready because Spagnuolo's going to bring blitzes from everywhere that he possibly can to try and confuse Love. And if Love is on, they can burn him. They can get him for some big plays, no doubt. But Kansas City's defense has played well this year. This is not a bad defense. This is not a junk defense. This is a really good defense. So to me, I want to see in this one, I want to see what they do. Like, what is going to be different? What kind of looks are you going to give them that's maybe going to hurt the Kansas City defense? I saw from, what was it, last week's game, I want to say. Kansas City brought a zero blitz. It was against the Bears, I think, from earlier this year. And the Bears sent, I think, 3 wideouts just straight out. And then at the very last second, the tight end just kind of leaked out over the middle. And just before Justin Fields gets hit, boop, he dumps it, 5 yards to Cole Kmet with nobody around him for 15 yards because they all took off down the field and they all went running with them. And he ran upfield for 10, 15 yards. And that's something that's nothing too hard to figure out, but that's something, again, that you can do to kind of break it up and try and get him to stop doing that zero blitz and give your quarterback some time. That's the type of stuff I want to see, and that's going to be on LaFleur, the play caller, to try and burn these guys and take advantage of it. Did you read the Athletic article by Matt Schneidman talking about Jaden Reed? In that article, he talks about on Tuesdays, the Packers' off day, okay? The wide receivers and a quarterback, and maybe the tight ends too, I think, are getting together on their off days and going over film with the coaches and looking at the opposing defense they're going to face that week. Every Tuesday, they've been doing this now for the last several weeks or whatever, and they chalk that up to part of the reason why this offense is playing so much better because they're doing all this extra film work together as a group on their off day to get ready for the next game. You're talking about young dudes wanting to work harder and put in extra film work. Say whatever you want about Gutekunst. He's got some guys with some work ethic. He's got some guys that have some competitive fire and don't want to suck, and they're willing to work on their off days. To me, that says all you need to know.
Jaden Reed that's the guy that's flashing. I mean, Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs have the talent, the obvious talent. But Jaden Reed is the guy who flashes, right? The guy that, Matt LaFleur said it after the last home game. They asked him about the question was about Jaden Reed, and he didn't even let the guy finish the question. He goes, "He's a dog. He's a dog." Like that's exactly the kind of guy that you need. So if you do that long enough, you do that for a dozen weeks, and it's not just one day of difference; it's 2 or 3 months of difference, right? That'll be the sort of thing that's tested here in this last 6 games of the season. Yeah, I got to say, I thought when we were in October, early November, that we were just going to be playing this string out, and wife was talking about trying to go on a trip in January, and now I'm having to tell her, like, hang on here, January is going to be a busy month if this keeps going like this, at least for a while. Even if it's 1 week, that's still pretty good. We'll figure out the trips.
And again, that's something else. 1 week, okay? Even if they get beat, that playoff experience for these young guys is huge. The intensity level, the crowds, everything is different in the playoffs than it is in the regular season. So even if you go and get beat in the first round in a wild card matchup or whatever, just to be able to experience the additional media that comes with playoff week, all the additional responsibilities that come with it, and then the intensity level of the game, that is huge experience you can have going into next season when, again, next year, and Bart and I talked about this team wins 8-9 games. Next year, they're going to be expected to be in the playoffs by this Packers fan base.
So this is the game that immediately comes to mind when you mention this. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in Arizona, the playoffs from the 2009 season. Yep. It was a 51-45 game where Carlos Dunlap, I think I got that name right, intercepted basically a handoff and ran it in for Arizona and ended the Packers season. But the battle that they had there in this 96-point playoff game, when you look at the long-term history of it, was the setting up point. The next playoff loss they had was after their next Super Bowl. They did not lose a game in the next playoffs after that year, and that was a quick turn, right? It was Rodgers was a starter, and they weren't very good, and then Rodgers in his second year as a starter, and they battled Arizona to that last play in overtime, and then they got really good. I don't think there's any reason that timeline couldn't repeat itself. I'm not talking about the Packers winning a Super Bowl next year, but gaining the experience and becoming like an extra level more dangerous next year is absolutely in play if they hang tough in that playoff game.
The headline of this podcast: Packers Super Bowl champs in 2025. We asked Kevin Holden. I mean, I think that's definitely all it has to be. At 321Q, Kevin on Twitter. He is the CBS58 sports director, Packers play-by-play announcer for Telemundo, Wisconsin as well. Crunchy Kevin Holden. Shout out to your cohort over there, Amanda Becker, for coming out to the toy drive yesterday morning. And we were doing hits on the local morning show on CBS58 from 5:30 till 8 o'clock in the morning. Yesterday got a lot of publicity for us, and we got some people coming out here to the toy drive, dropping off toys that saw it on CBS58. So that was awesome. So appreciate all the coverage you guys have given the toy drive over the years, and this year especially. And thanks so much, my friend.
Glad to do it, Sparky. Glad to talk sports as well. Anytime.